Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. Welcome to the Artist Futures info session. Thank you for being with us today. If you will all take some time to take a look at the screens, I will also read the instructions and we will actually just get started right on time. All right, so during the course of this session, please keep your microphone muted. If the presentation video or audio becomes choppy, turn off your video and that may improve the connection. Today's workshop is going to be recorded and shared online for those who were unable to attend. During the registration, some folks requested captioning. You can turn on automated captioning by using the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And Sam, one of my colleagues, is going to drop a link in the chat at this point to link to the PDF document for this slide presentation today. So if you would like to follow along, you can do that. And if you want to refer back to it a little bit later, you're welcome to do that as well. I will also be describing any visual elements allowed that are on this presentation. All right, so let's just talk about some norms before we jump into the presentation. So these are our virtual meeting norms. As we go through the presentation, we would prefer that you use the chat feature to ask any questions that you might have along the presentation. My colleague Mireya will be keeping tabs on the chat as I present, and I will be pausing throughout the presentation to answer questions that you have asked in the chat. We ask that you focus your questions on things that might be relevant to others as well as yourself. If you have questions that are specific to your situation, please plan to connect with me at a later date, and I'll be talking about how you can do that as well later on in this presentation. If you would like to add your pronouns to your name, you can use the rename feature to do that. Okay. All right, so before we dive in, let me just answer a few questions, some basic questions that have been coming through via phone and email inquiries. So first, as I noted a little bit earlier, this info session will be recorded. If you have questions following this session, or you're unable to attend and you're watching this recording, you can attend a virtual Q&A session that is currently scheduled for August 29th at noon. There is a link to that registration on our website. This will be a 1-hour open forum where I will answer any questions that participants bring to that session. There will be no presentation during that Q&A. The next bit of information, the submission deadline for Artist Futures. So the deadline for Artist Futures is October 3rd, 2022. And the opportunity will open, as in we're going to start accepting applications this coming Monday, August 22nd of 2022. So the earliest you can create a submission is Monday. All right. And I'll obviously be going through how to create your submission later in this presentation. So again, the deadline is October 3rd at 11:59 p.m. And there are no exceptions to that deadline. After the review and selection process, which I'll describe later as well, award notifications will be emailed on February 22nd of 2023. The award for Artist Futures is $35,000 in unrestricted financial support and $2,000 for professional development. Awardees will also have access to networking and professional development resources. Okay, so now that the basics have been covered, let's turn our attention to the agenda for today's session. First, we'll talk about MRAC, its staff, and our mission. Next, I'll give an overview of the Artist Futures program and how it was developed, as well as its goals. I'll describe the submission process and discuss what materials you will need in order to prepare to apply. And I'll go over how artists are selected. Lastly, we'll have a final Q&A, and remember, there will be Q&A opportunities throughout the course of the presentation. Today's workshop will last approximately 60 minutes with 30 minutes of Q&A throughout. Please remember that this is recorded and shared on the MRAC YouTube channel and website. So if you need to step away for any reason, please feel free to do so. There will not be any scheduled breaks during this session. Okay, so let me introduce you to the MRAC staff. This slide is a collection of small headshots of each staff member, 6 women and 1 man of varying racial backgrounds. All are smiling. The program directors are listed across the first row. First, there's Masami, followed by myself, Jovan. Next is Scott, and finally, Mireya. The second row has the rest of our wonderful team, Kathy, Becky, and Sam, who's also on this call. So both Sam and Mireya are here providing technical support and monitoring the chat, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. So feel free to communicate with us in the chat. Okay, so the MRAC mission. So we are a nonprofit organization with a mission to improve arts access for communities in the 7-county metro region through support to artists and organizations. So our strategy to meet this mission has been to distribute funds through grant programs to both artists and organizations with art projects. MRAC's funding is derived primarily from appropriations from the Minnesota State Legislature, with money from state's general fund and Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. We also receive generous funding from the McKnight Foundation. Artist Futures stems from a larger nationwide initiative designed to support BIPOC-led arts organizations called America's Cultural Treasures. The Ford Foundation launched America's Cultural Treasures in fall of 2020, seeking regional funding partners throughout the country to match its contribution and invest in BIPOC-led arts groups. In Minnesota, the McKnight Foundation answered that call to serve as the lead regional partner and matched an initial contribution of $5 million from the Ford Foundation. The Bush and Jerome Foundations contributed an additional $2.6 million to bring the fund to $12.6 million, with a goal of honoring the diversity of expression and excellence in Minnesota that historically goes under-recognized and under-resourced. Seeding Cultural Treasures is phase 2 of this initiative. So MRAC received $500,000 from the McKnight Foundation to engage artists and community stakeholders to co-create a program that would award funds to grow the future of BIPOC artists in the region. As a part of this Seeding Cultural Treasures initiative, Propel was chosen to administer the organizational funds, and MRAC was charged with developing a program that was specific for individual artists. So far, Propel has awarded 32 Minnesota organizations between $40,000 and $70,000 each. So as I mentioned in the last slide, Seeding Cultural Treasures was to be a co-created program directly informed by and responsive to the community that it serves. So Artist Futures was developed by a diverse group of artists and culture bearers. 11 advisors that we hired engaged with artists across backgrounds, experiences, and cultures in several intimate focus groups. One-on-one meetings were also held to engage key communities. Nearly 100 individual artists' voices informed the development of Artist Futures. We hope that selected artists have the resources that they need to take risks and creatively challenge themselves during the course of this program. We will support selected artists in broadening their networks to include relationships and strategies that could provide long-term support. MRAC will also provide resources that are significant enough to shift the selected artist's presence, practice, and life. We also hope to test new strategies to become a more equitable grant maker. Some of these strategies include testing a new application format, trying out new applicant services, and testing out new decision-making processes and technologies. All right, so we hope that we are able to reach these goals. And one of the ways that we're hoping to do that is through unrestricted financial support of $35,000 to the selected artists. I do want to define unrestricted for those of you who are not familiar with the term. So unrestricted means money that can be used for any purpose. So we are not going to dictate how you use your financial award. It may be spent on anything that you decide, whether that's rent, groceries, travel, research, art, healthcare, self-care, debt, student loans, anything that you need or want to pursue at that time, feel free. That is your award. Additionally, we will be providing $2,000 that is specifically designated for professional development. Some examples of that, and this is not a comprehensive list, but some examples are continuing education or training opportunities, or perhaps services that would help the artist develop new skills or implement new strategies. So that's pretty broad. So basically, the selected artists will have an opportunity to talk to us about what they want to use that $2,000 on, and we can help them make sure that it fits within our ideas of professional development, which is pretty broad. All right, so awardees are required to do the following things: attend a 90-minute Zoom meet and greet event to meet their cohort of selected artists, as well as network and learn how to access the available resources. A financial advisor, tax professional will join us for a portion of that initial meeting to talk about tax requirements and answer questions. This does impact your taxes because there is a financial award, but awardees will have the opportunity to decide how they want to receive that financial award, whether it's all in one lump sum, over the course of the 2-year cohort period, monthly, etc. They will also be required to attend 6 scheduled networking lunch hour meetings. These events will focus on expanding the network of selected artists by building relationships to other makers, arts professionals, and arts organizations. These meetings will be coordinated in partnership with the selected artists to best accommodate schedules and meet the needs of the cohort. In terms of how many artists will be selected, we have funding for 10 artists. So this pilot program of Artist Futures will be a cohort of 10. This is a pilot program. It's the first time we're doing something like this, and it's the first time that we're creating this application process, decision-making process. There's a lot of things that are new that we're trying out. So we hope to gain feedback from those who participate in not only the submission process, but also the cohort and their experience as a whole. Okay, actually, let's pause here and just see, are there any questions so far before I dive into eligibility?
Hi, Jovan, this is Mireya. Right now, there are no questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to raise their hand or unmute and ask, feel free to do so.
Awesome. Okay, I'll keep going. And there will be another Q&A in just a few slides, but I do want to go through eligibility and then we can stop again. All right. Eligibility for Artist Futures is limited to individual artists and culture bearers of African, Afro-Latinx, Afro-Caribbean, Latinx, Chicanx, Asian Pacific Islander, and Southwest Asian or North African descent residing in the 7-county metropolitan region. This region includes Anoka, Carver, Dakota, Hennepin, Ramsey, Scott, and Washington counties. Artists who are Native American, American Indian, Native Alaskan, residing anywhere in Minnesota and the 11 tribal nations that share the same geography are also eligible to apply for this opportunity. Artists must live in the eligible region for at least 1 year prior to the deadline and during the entire contract period. So that would be the contract period is February 2023 to February 2025. Okay. Additional eligibility points. Artists must have an active artistic practice, meaning artists must have been creating their own artwork during the past 5 years and must be able to provide work samples that have been created between 2017 and 2022. Artists must be available to participate, whether that's virtually or in person, in the cohort meetings during the 2-year cohort period. And so that's those 6 meetings that will take place throughout that 2-year period. If you have doubts at all about your ability to commit to a cohort experience or are not interested in expanding your artistic community, pursuing professional development opportunities, or sharing knowledge and resources, then this program may not be a good fit for you. So just reach out to me and we can have a discussion about whether or not this is a good experience and fit for you. Final eligibility points. Selected artists must have an individual tax identification number or a social security number, as this is a financial award, which means it is taxable income and it will be reported on a 1099 form. So this increased income may impact certain benefits that folks receive. So selected artists will be able to choose how and when they want to receive payment. And we also encourage them to work with a financial advisor to determine the payment options that's best suited for them. And again, we will have a financial advisor present for the first initial meeting where the cohort gets to meet each other. Artists must be at least 18 years of age on the deadline date, which again is October 3rd of this year. Artists currently enrolled or with plans to be enrolled before 2025 in a traditional arts degree program to pursue a BFA or similar degree are not eligible to apply. Okay, let's take another break and see if there's any questions specifically about eligibility or if there's anything else that might have come up in the chat.
Hi, Jovan, this is Mireya. I answered one of the questions about if there's an age limit, and the only eligibility requirement on our end is that applicants be at least 18 on the deadline day, which is October 3rd. And then there was a follow-up question about whether this opportunity is geared toward younger artists. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
So the opportunity, the cohort experience, learning opportunities, professional development opportunities will be catered to the specific cohort that is chosen. That's one of the reasons that the cohort is small, and another reason that it happens over a stretched amount of time, so that I can get to know the group, find out what it is that folks want to learn, and begin to connect you with those resources. So we have no assumptions about or expectations about what level, career level folks are in. You're welcome to apply at any career level, and the opportunity and experiences will be tailored specifically to the cohort that's selected.
Thank you. And then there was another question about how many work samples will they be able to provide?
Sure. So we'll get to that. If we want to hold that question, I have a whole slide section about the work samples. So if that's all right, let's just hold off on that question.
Yeah, okay. And then another question came in, which I can answer. It's if a person has received an MRAC grant, can they still apply for this grant? And the answer is yes, they're eligible
Yes.
to apply if they meet the other requirements.
Absolutely.
And then another question, I am pursuing a bachelor's degree in music composition scheduled for graduation of May 2023. Am I eligible to apply?
It sounds like no, because the contract and cohort period is between February of 2023 through 2025. And so it sounds like you might not be able to apply. Sorry.
Thank you. And then we have one more question here in the chat, which says, I am a disabled artist. Would I be able to get help so I won't lose my SSI funds?
Yes, that is definitely something that we are wanting to connect folks specifically with tax advisors and financial advisors so that they can help you navigate your specific situation. We are aware that some folks have benefits that they rely on. We as MRAC staff don't know how to specifically advise on those specific situations, but we are aware of them. And if you are selected, you'll be able to work with somebody to make sure that you don't lose your benefits as a result of getting this award.
And that tax consultation happens on the very first session.
Correct. And then you will have access to that person or another person of your choosing throughout the cohort period.
All right, thank you. So one more question came in.
Sure.
And it says, is this one-time opportunity only or is it annual? If one doesn't get this round, will there be another chance?
We hope so, but we do not know at this point, but we will keep you posted. We are actively trying to make sure that we have enough funding to continue this opportunity, but it is our pilot program, so things may change from one deadline to the next, but we'll keep you posted on future opportunities.
All right, and one more question came in, which
Sure.
I could also answer, and you'll talk about. It's how many people will be selected, 10, and then there'll be different groupings that we'll talk about later in the presentation, or you will, Javon. So
exactly.
Those are all the questions that have come in so far. And there will be
Awesome.
another Q&A session, so this
Yes,
won't be the
there
last one.
Yeah, thank you, Mireya. All right, so this slide shows the international disability symbol, a person using a wheelchair. So MRAC requests that all applicants apply online unless a disability prevents them from doing so. Please contact us to begin a conversation about how to make sure that you have an equal opportunity to apply. There are also many ways of applying, and so I will talk about those types of applications a little bit later as well. The guidelines for this opportunity are available online, and they are ready for a screen reader, software, and translation program. We can also provide the guidelines in other formats and other languages. So if the guidelines that are posted to the website right now are not accessible to you, please reach out and let us know. We likely have guidelines that will work for you, or we can work to get something that's more accessible to you created. The guidelines are currently available on our website in English, Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. Okay. All right, so let's start to discuss the submission process. First, there are two types of submissions. You can submit as the artist or as an artist advocate. So let me talk about the artist submission first. It's pretty self-explanatory, but if you are an eligible artist, then you will be guided through an eligibility quiz. And then the application will, you'll navigate to the application if you are able to get through that eligibility quiz. So if the eligibility quiz does not come back in your favor, you will get a notification at that time saying, unfortunately, you're not eligible for this opportunity. If you are eligible, you will go right into the application and be able to complete that. And I'll talk about what the application consists of as well in the upcoming slide. The second type of application or submission is an artist advocate submission. So let me talk to you about what that means. All right, so MRAC recognizes that individuals often come across opportunities that they would like to recommend people for, and we encourage this type of support through our submission process. If you would like to submit an artist's name for consideration, or if you are an artist who would like someone to submit on your behalf, they may submit as an artist advocate. Advocates do not need to get permission from the artist that they are advocating for or notify the artist in advance. Artists will have the opportunity to opt out of consideration if they don't wish to participate in this opportunity. So if you do want to be an artist advocate, maybe you're not eligible for this opportunity, but you have somebody in mind that you really think we should consider, or you want to put their name in the hat, you can create a submission for them, but please know you can only create one. Everybody only can create one submission, whether you're the artist or an artist advocate. So if you're an artist applying, please don't have an advocate apply for you as well. We will see it, we will remove it, okay? Please don't give us that extra work. All right, so artist advocates will also be able to invite artists to help them complete the submission using the collaborator feature, which is in Submittable. And so this opportunity will be promoted through Submittable. So typically we use a different grant making platform or application platform. We are testing out Submittable. It's a very exciting time for us at MRAC. You may or may not be familiar with using it. We feel that it is a bit more user-friendly than our other applications, but they also offer technical support. So if there's a feature in the application that you're having trouble with, you can either reach out to them for technical support directly from the website, or you can reach out to us here at MRAC, okay? So, but the collaborator feature, for example, if the advocate wants to start an application, but maybe they don't have all of the artist's particulars, address, racial identity, etc., then they can hit a button and put in the person that they are inviting to collaborate with, the artist that they want to advocate for. And that they will get an email saying, hey, can you help me fill out this application? And then both of you can be working on it at the same time. So maybe you'll fill out your address or upload work samples, etc. Okay.
Jovan,
Yes.
before we move on, there was a question on the previous slide on what happens if more than one advocate submits an application for an artist.
If more than one advocate submits an application for an artist, we will only include their name in the decision-making process one time. So we will basically, you'll get a phone call or an email from us, from MRAC staff saying, hey, you know, somebody wants you to be to know about this opportunity and has put your name in for consideration. Do you want to be considered for this? If so, can you give us this missing information? So, so no worries there. There's not going to be anything that the artist that's being advocated for needs to do. We will handle that internally. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah. And then if there are follow-up questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But that was the only question we had so far.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's talk about how to prepare a submission. So you will need to provide basic information about yourself. And we ask you to do that with these 7 required questions and providing work samples. So we want you to tell us about your artwork and creative process in a short letter. It could be a short letter, a video, or an audio file. The recommended length is 1 to 3 paragraphs if you're doing a written letter, or 2 to 5 minutes of a video or audio file. These are just the recommended lengths. If you go over or under, that is totally okay, all right? Please only choose one application type though, one submission type. So if you want to create a letter, then please stick with that. Please try not to send us a letter and a video or a video and an audio file. It just isn't necessary, and you'll kind of understand a little bit more as to why as I talk about the decision-making process. But we are trying to make this a very streamlined, simplistic process for all the people that want to create a submission, okay? All right, so these are the questions that you will be required to answer. Question number 1, what is your artistic practice? So what do you make or create? That's what we want to know. So you might talk about how you're a dancer, a writer, cartoonist, photographer, and a little bit about the work that you create. Question number 2, describe your artistic interests. So, you know, perhaps you're a tap dancer who's interested in the history of hoofing as a replacement to African percussion instruments during the slave era, right? Maybe that's what really inspires you or interests you. Or maybe you are a projection designer who's interested in AI and creating metaverses. That's cool too. Whatever you're interested in, just let us know a little bit about that. Question 3, how long have you been pursuing art and presenting your work? It's like, you know, a 1-sentence answer. I've been creating my work since I was 15, or I've been creating for the past 5 years, but I've only been presenting for the last 6 months. Whatever it is, just let us know where you're at in your career. What creative projects are you currently working on? So just give us a few examples of the things that you're doing. These don't have to be big projects. They can be, you know, I'm really into sketchbooks, and I'm working on my 50th sketchbook right now, and maybe talk about, you know, why you like that so much. Maybe you're working on a collaborative piece, or maybe you're in the middle of some research. You know, just let us know what you're working on. Number 5, share any recently completed projects. This also could be a personal project or a public project. So maybe you just finished research for a film or a draft of a new novel. Doesn't have to be something that has been, you know, presented widely. Just let us know what you, any kind of recently completed projects that you want to share with us. Let us know those. Tell us about any upcoming projects that you will pursue over the next 2 years. So these are examples of what you might be exploring during the cohort period. So the answer to this question will help us determine what types of resources you might be interested or what might be useful if you're chosen for the cohort. Number 7, why do you want to participate in the Artist Futures program? So what are you interested in learning about or gaining from this program? Are you most interested in the networking opportunities, on the skill building opportunities, on having access to resources? You know, what is it that you're really excited about when it comes to the Artist Futures program? And then there's a final optional question. I'm sure that this kind of short list of questions doesn't cover everything that you might want to say to us. So if you do have something else you want to share, feel free to do so. If not, that's totally okay. So is there anything else you want to share with us? You'll have the opportunity to say those things. All right, so here is the work sample slide, but actually I'll pause to see if there's any questions about the application questions or the submission questions.
Hi, Jovan, it's Mireya. There were some follow-up questions to what happens is if an advocate or more than one advocate submits an artist name. And so just to clarify, it will be one submission. So regardless of how many advocates say one specific artist, it'll be one name that goes through. And we'll talk more about the groupings in a second.
Exactly.
And then there were 2 more questions that came in since. Yes, this is being recorded. And then, 3 questions. The second one is, will projects for hire be suitable work sample versus independent personal artistic projects?
We'll talk about work samples in the next slide, but probably.
All right, and then the last question that came through is, would this be 2 to 3 paragraphs for each of the questions, or it's for
God.
all of the questions?
All of them. You can
One
do
of-
one sentence per answer, like you definitely not 2 to 3 paragraphs per question. We are recommending 1 paragraph total to 3 paragraphs total. You'll understand in a few slides, but a comprehensive explanation is 100% not necessary at all. Does not help you or hurt you to be overly detailed or not in this application. So we just need some basic information in order to run the program and check for eligibility, but you do not need to send us comprehensive, highly detailed information.
Thank you so much. So those were all the questions.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about those work samples. So MRAC requires that artists submit links or upload work samples of their artwork so that we can confirm that artists have a current artistic practice. Some samples should, or work samples should be original creations produced between 2017 and 2022. Please know that if the work that you are creating, including in a work sample is a product of a collaboration, then please just make a note of what your role was in the creative decision-making process. And I guess I'll take a little moment to answer that last question a little bit more deeply now. I know that in our other grant programs, we have really specific rules about not submitting like client work. I think that we want to see what your ideas are in general, but it is not required that everything you send us be your personal work. If you have a combination of some client work and some things that you're working on your own, that's totally fine. But I will talk about this a little bit later. We're not going to make any judgment calls about the quality of your work samples. We just need the work samples to show that you are an artist cultural bearer. So whether it's client work or not, as long as you did it, it's okay. Does that make sense? Just want to check in with the person from the chat.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that does. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, now the work sample types that we are accepting, and I'm sure that there may be some other types of work samples that you have that are not listed here. You can reach out to check to see if they're okay, but really if the system lets you upload them, it's probably good. But some examples are links to artist websites. You're welcome to just put a link to your website there, and that would be enough. You can link to specific images, written works, audio or video files, whether that's on YouTube or another platform. You're welcome to do that. There's no length limitation, minimum or maximum in terms of those files. You can really just send us links to your work. You can also send us links to any interviews or press if you don't have, a website or something like that, but maybe you had a show that was reviewed. You can send us that link. Or you might have some published work on somebody else's website or platform. You can send us that as well. Or you can upload images, video, audio, or written works. In terms of the number of work samples, as you can kind of tell, it's a little bit open. You'll be asked, do you want to submit your work samples through your website link, or do you want to upload? So do you want to give us a link, or do you want to upload, or both? You'll have that option. So you'll choose which option. And if it is a link, then you'll be able to put in, I believe it's 3 links. If it's an upload, you'll be able to upload 5 things. And if it is both, then I think you can submit 1 link and 2 uploads or something like that. I might be getting those numbers wrong, but hopefully, given that you don't have to, shorten audio, submit a certain small number of pages for writing, things like that, hopefully this is an easier process. Are there any questions about the work samples before I move on?
Yes, Jovan, thanks for
Yeah.
asking. A couple came in right as you were
Good.
talking about this. So
Yeah.
the one here, okay, so can or do all of the work samples have to be within 2017 to 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And then will there be time or size limits for uploads?
No.
And I'm not sure if this is a question, so Donna, feel free to unmute it. The comment says, I'm interested in local to national working as curator with disability self-examination building experience. If you want to.
Hey, I'm unmuting. What it is that I am interested in exploring my own experience as a disabled artist, nationally and locally, as well as trying to learn to build a body of work as a curator with others in the future. Would I be able to apply for this? That's what my question was.
Donna Ray, is that you?
That is me.
Hi, Donna Ray. You are an artist in the eligible region. You fit the eligibility. You can apply. Yes. I don't know if the skill building opportunities will focus on curation. It might if your own work includes that, but there will be ample opportunities to network with other artists and with arts organizations. So I can see it serving both your creative artistic career as well as your future plans.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
All right, and then we have another question regarding work samples from Ping. The commenting question are, I'm a multimedia artist and I present my public installations in film forms. If the materials for the film took place before 2017, but the making/editing of the film is more present, would that be okay?
Yes, I think usually you submit or you put the final creation date. And so if that falls within the eligible range, that's fine. It often takes a long time to, research, produce, and create the final product. That's fine. We just want to know when was it completed is usually the date that we go by.
Thank you. And that was the last work sample related question.
Okay, great. And then I'll just add on to that for folks that are performers and choreographers, if you created a performance, play, body of work prior to 2017, but it was performed recently, I think that is also okay. All right. Cool. Okay. So another consideration that we have for the Artist Futures program, if you were a 2022, which is this past round of Next Step Fund, if you were a FY 2022 Next Step Fund finalist or recipient, and you meet the eligibility requirements for the Artist Futures program, then you do not have to complete a submission. Your name will automatically be placed into consideration. If you do not wish to be considered, then you will have the opportunity to opt out of consideration. We will send you an email and reach out via phone if we can't reach you through email to see if you do not want to be considered in this opportunity. So I just want to give you a little bit of rationale behind that choice. So each year, the Next Step Fund is MRAC's most competitive grant program. We are only able to fund about 30 awards out of over 500 applications. So in an effort to honor the time commitment that artists have put forth in previous applications, we're removing the barrier of completing yet another application. We already have the majority of the required information that we need for the Artist Futures submission. And if there's any missing details, then we will follow up with those individuals and the Next Step Fund finalists from this past year for any missing information. So hopefully that is helpful. If we could go back even further, we would. But we did not retain work samples from any previous years. We just have the work samples from the folks from this past round. Any questions on that? And actually, I am coming up on my Q&A session, so Any questions in general?
There have been none in the chat, but if anybody wants to unmute and ask, feel free to do so.
All right, I'll move on.
Oh, hello.
Oh,
So
no, I'll go back.
Um,
Okay, go ahead.
if I was a next step finalist, but I want to submit additional work that gives a broader view of my practice, would that be possible? Just because my next step application was pretty targeted to one practice.
It's possible, but you won't need to. So hold on to that thought. And then after this next set of slides about the selection process, let me know if you still would want to do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
There was one, and it's the same answer that Jovan
Oh.
just gave.
Okay.
It's if the question was, if I never applied for next step, would that be a disadvantage? The answer is no.
Like that.
And then, so only fiscal year 2022 next step awardees become automatically eligible?
All finalists and awardees will automatically, that meet eligibility, will automatically have a submission created for them because we already have their information in the system. Those are not the only people that are eligible. Those are just people that don't have to create an additional submission. Does that
And
answer
that
your
does
question?
not mean that they have more.
They don't have an advantage. They
Exactly.
just have a submission. It doesn't give them a leg up on anybody.
Those were the only questions that we have now. Oh,
Right.
all more coming in.
Okay.
And again, fiscal year 2021 next step, they weren't included in this because we don't have their work samples.
That's the only reason.
And we will talk about the selection process.
The next slide. Okay, should I move forward? I think so. Okay, great. Selection process. All right, so with Artist Futures, MRAC will explore a new framework for how to support artists. MRAC recognizes the disparities in funding structures and understands that decision-making processes within these systems can feel like gatekeeping. We aim to press against this norm by exploring a process that removes bias and judgments on value and worthiness. A panel of readers will review each submission for eligibility only. If questions arise or additional clarity is needed, then we may reach out to you to get those questions answered or to get clarity on anything that we were confused about in your submission. All submissions that meet the eligibility criteria will be entered into one or more priority groupings, as well as the general artist pool, and randomly selected. So just want to pause on that for a second. There will be a random selection to choose the 10 selected artists. There is no panel review process. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what these priority groupings are, and then I'll take questions about the process because it really is just that simple, but I know there's going to be some questions. All right, so let's talk about these groupings. These groupings are in direct response to disparities within the artist community that this program serves. We hope that the artists that submit feel comfortable sharing the fullness of their identities, experiences, and individuality with us. We celebrate intersectionality and are fully committed to honoring the complexity of marginalized identities. Artists who have intersecting identities or experiences will be represented in each grouping that describes them, giving them more than one opportunity to be chosen. So let's talk about what these groupings are. The first grouping that you'll see is focus group participants. If you remember from the beginning of this presentation, I talked about how this was a co-created opportunity. So in the process of creating this program, we held several focus groups and spoke one-on-one to folks. So there were approximately 100 people that offered their voice to this process. And all of those people would be eligible for this opportunity. So of those 100 focus group participants, by the way, they still need to apply. They will not be automatically entered into the pool. They will be invited, specifically reminded that they are eligible, but they do need to create a submission. So of those 100 names, one will be chosen from the focus group participant grouping. Artists who are experiencing unstable housing. So some examples of this include homelessness, pending eviction, or living in temporary housing, but that is not the extent of how we define this. We do not have a hard definition. We feel that people know if they are experiencing unstable housing or not. But if you do have questions about what this means and whether or not you would qualify for this grouping, we encourage you to reach out to us to have a discussion. So of all of the people who let us know that they are an artist experiencing unstable housing, one name will be chosen from this grouping. Artists who are non-binary, gender non-conforming, or trans will also have one artist pool selected from that grouping. Artists with disabilities or disabled artists will have one artist chosen from this grouping. Emerging artists will have one artist chosen from this grouping. Now, we also don't have a set definition for what emerging artist means. Why? Well, you might have been making art for the last 10 years, but maybe you've never ever shared your work publicly. I would still say that you're emerging. You're still kind of coming into your career and understanding, or really just stepping into the career side of your art making. But if you are not sure, whether or not you're emerging, definitely reach out to us to have a conversation. Also, there is an optional upload in the submission where you can upload your resume or CV. So if you're just not sure and you want for MRAC to decide, then we will go based off of what you have written in your resume CV and what you've said in your application as a whole to make that determination. Okay. And then there will be 5 artists chosen from the general artist pool. Okay, so that makes 10 total selected artists for the Artist Futures program. So let me talk a little bit about or clarify what I mean when I say that artists experiencing intersecting identities or experiences will be represented in each grouping that describes them. So let me just talk about that for a second. So if you are an artist who is experiencing unstable housing, you're an artist with disabilities, and you're an emerging artist, you will have your name placed in the artist experiencing unstable housing, artist with disabilities, disabled artist, emerging artist, and general artist pool. So that means that you will have 4 opportunities for your name to be chosen. Does that make sense? Any questions about the selection process or these groupings?
There was one question in the chat related to the groupings regarding emerging artists. So for them, they're a veteran poet, but a new filmmaker. Would they be an emerging artist in this field?
That is a really good question. Probably not. We're kind of looking at your career holistically, not by artistic discipline. So if you are a veteran in a field of art, then you are not an emerging artist, because this Artist Futures is not a discipline specific opportunity. Does that make sense?
Hearing no questions or follow-up, not seeing anything in the chat regarding that specific question, there was another question regarding selection, and it says, with this random selection process, is there a chance an application would not be viewed?
Would not be viewed. Viewed? All applications, all submissions will be reviewed for eligibility and placed into one or more of these groupings. I don't know if that answers your question. I might be confused about what you mean about viewed.
That
There's
question's
no
from,
panel. Mhm.
oh, that question's from me. I just wondered if once you're put in these separate groupings, then it's a random selection, right? You just kind of pull names out of the hat in each of these groups. So you might not, your application might not actually be kind of considered then.
So there's no panel that makes like scoring considerations or judgments about the quality of the application in any way, shape, or form. There will be a panel of readers that will review each submission for eligibility, and based on the information that you include in your application, we will place you into one or more of these groupings. So every application will be placed into the general artist pool. Everybody will be placed into the general artist pool, all submissions. Then if your submission qualifies for any of these other groupings, you'll be placed in those as well. So every application will be placed into the general artist pool. So you will be considered if that's what you mean. You will have an opportunity as long as you hit submit and you're eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions there?
We had a work sample question
Okay.
that was, must it include work from 2017 or can it be predominantly from the last couple of years?
Totally. Yep. Anywhere between 2017 and present is good. 2022, 2017 to 2022.
Perfect, thank you. And then Ping, if you could unmute and talk a little bit more. The question was, could you talk more about focus groups?
Yeah, if you could clarify your question.
I'm not sure what is focus group participants.
So the focus groups already took place between January and March of this year. So the advisory committee that was hired to help create this opportunity held, that was 11 individuals. So they held small focus groups, and we also interviewed artists in the community one-on-one to give us feedback about what their needs are, how much money would be helpful to them, what types of resources do they wish they had access to, what has prevented them from applying to grants in the past, you know, how have they found the application preparation process in general, not only at MRAC, but in general across art grant making. So based on that feedback, we created this program. And so in order to honor the time that those folks offered to us and the knowledge and the vulnerability of them sharing their experiences, we've created because we heard a lot of need and a lot of struggle from those 100 individuals. And so there is a opportunity for one of them to be a part of this cohort with the focus group participants. So either you were a part of those, and I have those names, or you were not. But it's not a new opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a few more questions coming in. This other one was, in our 2 to 3 paragraph written or 2 to 5 minute video submission, would you recommend
1 to 3?
Would you recommend specifically addressing in which groupings the artist believes they belong?
In the submission, there are checkboxes for you to select those. So you don't have to address that in the as a response to the 7 required questions in your letter or video or audio. You don't need to address that. In the application, there are checkboxes that you can select all that apply to you.
Thank you. So then this is a follow-up question on that. If selected artists are randomly selected, could you explain what the application questions will be used for?
Sure. So let me just go back to that slide for us. Oops, nope, that's it. Okay, great. So as I mentioned in one of these, we're checking for 2 things. We want this information for 2 purposes. One purpose is eligibility. As we've stated, this is an opportunity specific to artists in the region and culture bearers. So we want, if you're an artist in the region, we want to know that you're an artist in the region. So we ask you to describe these things so that we are certain that you're an artist in the region. If we get responses that are vague, confusing, and we aren't sure if you meet eligibility, you'll be getting a follow-up phone call or email from us. That's also why the deadline is October, the beginning of October, but the notification is February. We want to give ourselves time to do follow-up questions. So if there's information that we feel is confusing, missing, we're actually not sure if this person is really eligible, we will have the time to follow up with individuals to make sure that they do meet eligibility. So even though it's totally fine for you to be succinct in your responses, they also need to be clear, but if they're not, we'll reach out, okay? The next reason is because we want to be able to have a little bit of a heads up as to what types of things folks are interested in, learning, pursuing, what are you going to be working on over the next couple of years? Not because you need to spend your money pursuing those things, but because we want to have the information needed to provide you with useful resources. So what types of projects have you created? What types of projects are you interested in creating? What kind of experience, networking experiences, skill building things are you interested in pursuing and learning and over the next couple of years? Answering those questions will help us partner with the right organizations, consultants, et cetera, so that you have access to resources that are actually useful to you specifically. Does that make sense?
Thank you. If there are follow-up questions with that, please throw them in the chat. There were some questions regarding the readers. How are they chosen and how many readers will there be to determine eligibility?
Sure. One thing that I did want to say that I did not include in this presentation, and I should have, I want to make it clear, it's in the guidelines. Be sure to read the guidelines before you reach out for questions, please, please, please. But I want to make it clear that you are able to apply in any language. You do not need to apply in English, whether it's written or a voice memo or a recording, a video recording. You can apply in the language that you're most comfortable communicating in, and we will have it translated internally so that we can check for eligibility. Okay, so just make sure that you don't need to cater to English speakers. Totally fine to apply in whatever way you're most comfortable. And if someone who doesn't speak English is selected for the opportunity, we can work with translators throughout the course of the cohort experience. All right, just wanted to make that clear. Okay, now to go to your question. Which remind me what it was. Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. The question was about readers.
Okay, yes.
How are they chosen and how many will there be?
So I will tell you this. My initial thought was that we would only need 3 readers. But just given how many folks wanted to sign up for this info session and how quickly it reached capacity, I'm rethinking that. We might need more like 5, but I'm not sure yet. So it will depend on staff availability to see if there's anybody other than myself and Sam that can help read through the applications for eligibility. There will also be an initial ask to the advisors that helped create the program, as long as there are no conflicts of interest, as in they applied. Then they can come on as a reader, and then anybody else will be chosen in the same way that we choose our panel. So Sam, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know we have several hundred, if not 1,000 or so names in our database for folks that have participated in our process in the past. We will still be choosing people whose identities reflect those of the eligibility. So it's pretty open. I will be overseeing the entire process. So in terms of like how people review, readers will flag an application if they think it's not eligible. In my eyes, as well as our executive director, Kathy, we will determine whether or not there is an eligibility issue. But if we think there is an eligibility issue, we will probably reach out to that person as well, if it's not just glaring, if it's just a little bit confusing, because really, if you made it past the eligibility quiz, then we might need to call you, like, how did you make an application if you're ineligible, right? So, so if we find that there's an application that's ineligible, then you'll likely get an email or phone call from us. But in terms of who makes the final decision, that's MRAC staff and leadership. Okay? Does that answer that question?
I'm not hearing anything, so I will move on. But again, if you need more clarification, feel free to throw it in the chat.
Yep.
And we're also here after this webinar to talk through this. A question, this next one is about the focus groups. How did people get into those?
So the 11 advisors were asked to pull from their separate communities, people that they know, whether they have participated in MRAC grant making or not. The majority of folks that participated in focus groups had never applied to MRAC. And so we got to learn about why, what some of those barriers are, whether that's application length, the types of questions, maybe the amount of the award, what's been the problem, or maybe it's just been a matter of, I didn't know. So we learned a lot from the focus groups. So each advisor was asked to pull from their community so that there was a diverse group of voices. The advisory committee was also extremely diverse in terms of racial, ethnic identity, where they live in Minnesota and in the region, as well as artistic discipline, and where they were in their career stages, or if they're culture bearers as well. So every group that was that's eligible was represented on the advisory level as well. And then what MRAC staff did was, wherever there was a hole of knowledge, right? Like maybe we did not hear enough from artists with disabilities. I had one-on-one meetings with additional artists in the community to make sure that their voices were heard in informing the process as well. One of the suggestions that was given to the advisors in order to make sure they had a diverse group of not just people, but of experience, was to invite somebody and then have that person invite that person to bring somebody else, so that maybe the focus groups were 50% people that and 50% people that you had never met that were outside of your community. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. All right, so then when awardees are eventually announced, are the groupings in which they fell kept confidential?
Yes, 100%. That's internal information only.
All right, thank you. And then there was this question from Veronica, and I think I might need a little more information to understand the question, but what it says right now is, do next step finalists from 2023, I'm assuming 2022,
right?
Do they still need to submit some kind of intention to apply?
No.
And then would it be possible to be added as an emerging artist?
So each next step finalist that fits eligibility will get an email from me that says, hey, you fit the eligibility for Artist Futures, and an application will be prepared for you. Is this information correct? So if you moved, if you have a new website, et cetera, you can update your information at that time.
All right, thank you so much. I know you already said this, but
That's
when will the application open?
Oh yes, Monday, the 22nd. I know we've been working on this for like a year. So the fact that you guys are able to hit apply on Monday is wild to me, but Monday, the 22nd.
All right, thank you so much. Then
Absolutely.
I believe that was all of the questions in the chat. If I missed one, or if you want to unmute, this would be the time to do so.
I'm going to stop sharing so I can see folks if you all have questions. And if there are none, that is the end of my presentation.
I have one follow-up.
Okay.
This is Melissa again about the whole selection process. So I totally get that you do your paragraph and then you're judged on your eligibility and you're placed into the groups that apply for you, whether it's unstable housing or non-binary or whatever. But from that point on, it sounds like it is random selection. Is that right?
Correct.
That you will pick like one name out of each
one
group or
name
whatever?
of the priority groupings and then 5 out of the general
Okay.
pool.
Okay.
5 names out of the general pool. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I got it now.
Okay. Any other questions? Echo what Veronica expressed.
That was a shout out. It's Veronica said, wonderful, thank you. This is a radical selection process, an amazing opportunity for artists. Thanks for your time and giving us an in-depth understanding of this opportunity. So exciting.
Awesome. We're excited too. You have no idea. We're so excited to learn whatever we can from this pilot program in hopes of making equitable grant making more possible at MRAC and in the region. We're just trying to get a little closer to like, what do we need to do and to actually reach equity? So we're going to be trying some radical things that may be perceived as radical. We've been itching to do them for a while, so we're excited to be able to try things out with this program, but we are also relying on your feedback. So please let us know what worked, what didn't work, what felt really good, what you wish you had, you know, more time to explain or express. And we are constantly always checking our internal bias up against, you know, the things that we're used to versus the things that will actually get us closer to equity. So we ask for you all to do the same thing. I'm an artist that applies to things all the time as well. And I, you know, get very used to like, this application does well and gets me money. So now taking that away, for those who have been successful at getting grants, we know that that's going to feel a little weird and a little like, I don't like this. But we also recognize that there are folks with a lot of different backgrounds, education levels, language experience, where these typical traditional processes it's a huge barrier in order to really be considered as competitive in getting the funding. So we're trying to see if we remove these barriers, like, no, you don't have to be a great writer. You don't have to be able to communicate really well, speaking or writing. You just need to be an artist that contributes to this region at whatever level. Like, how can we support and amplify artists in general and make this experience or grant making in general available to more people, not just those who figured out the formula. So, so it's something that we're trying, and you may like it and you may not. I would have mixed feelings too if I were eligible, but I made it, so I'm not. But definitely, however you feel, give us your feedback. Just because we get your feedback doesn't mean we're going to be changing whatever you say, but we're down to hear you. We're down to hear you out and learn. Okay. All right.
Thank
so if
you
there's
for that. There was a question.
Oh, good. Because we have
You
time.
also
So whatever questions.
You also answered this, but I think it's just good to repeat. The question was, does your chance increase with the more groupings you are in?
I mean, I guess it kind of depends on how many people are in that grouping, right? So I would say yes, in theory, yes, right? Like if you are in the general artist pool, but you are not a part of any of the other priority groupings, then you have one opportunity for your name to be selected. If you are facing some of the challenges of that were identified in these focus groups for artists and our BIPOC artists in our region, then yeah, you might have more than one opportunity to be chosen. So potentially.
Thank you. And then another question related to the random selection process is how is it going to be carried out? And I'm wondering if this person would like to unmute. And is it like with other grant programs, with other rounds? Like what is that as a question?
Hi, that was my question. I'm just wondering, what is the process for randomization?
Like what software are
And-
we using, or?
Oh, is it through a software?
So it's through, so I'm not going to take credit for this because I was looking and I could not find what I was looking for. But Sam, who is on the call as well, if you want to unmute, you're welcome to. But Sam, there is actually an Excel formula that can randomize and choose a name from everybody that's in that Excel document. So that's how that will be the process. It's not going to be one of us putting names in a hat and picking out. We will export a list from Submittable for each category. So there'll be everyone who is eligible that applied, right? So that will be one list. And there will be the Excel formula will be run 5 times to pull 5 random names from that list. Then there will be the artist experiencing, unstable housing, 1 name from that. Then there'll be the list for, all the other priority groupings, and 1 name from each of those until we get the 10 unique names. So if the off chance that somebody's name gets chosen in more than 1, we'll choose until there's a unique name. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that the rest of my comment was, this is radical and exciting, and thank you all for all the thought that has gone into this thus far. So thank you.
Thank you. We're really excited, as I think it's obvious from our faces, but we appreciate to hear that as well. Thank you. Anyone else?
There's no more questions in the chat.
All right, well, why don't we stop the recording, and I want to thank you all for being with me here today. I will remind you, if you do have questions that come up, there is still room in the Q&A session that will be taking place on August 29th at noon. So feel free to register for that. That is on the MRAC Artist Futures page. If you would like to, if you read the guidelines, maybe rewatch this recording and you have some more questions, feel free to ask at that time. Or you can use the meeting request form that is on that same page to set up a one-on-one meeting with me if you have a question that's more specific to your situation. Okay?